Sounds good. So let's get into the nuts and bolts here. The reason why I got you on today, as you know, is you're on one of the healthcare committees in the Senate, and we are handling these exchanges now, trying to get this ball rolling. It seems like a quagmire with the Affordable Care Act, which I always put in air quotes. I'm not so sure if that word affordable is an option.
Ben, I actually always say, look, it's the Unaffordable Care Act. And we can't forget the original purpose of what this thing was supposed to be all about.
Mm-hmm.
It was about two things, right? It's about making sure we can find the opportunity for those who don't have insurance to have insurance. And then the second half of that was the federal government said it was going to be affordable. So, we might get 1 out of 2 on this, and I think even with that, it might not be a win.
Andy, go ahead.
People say all the time, Ben, what is the exchange? Few people understand it. We have, we hear the word exchange, we hear the word navigators, we hear the word consumer assisters, and people are having a hard time and trying to struggle to understand what it's all about.
Yep.
And so here's kind of how it works, or at least on the consumer side. The federal government, and in most states, the federal government, some states are trying to do this themselves, have made a decision that they're going to try and build a website or a portal. Think Travelocity or think Expedia. So they're trying to build this portal that's going to provide a new level of insurance plans for people to consider to buy. Now, in order to try and make sure that those who don't have insurance have insurance, the federal government's going to create this new job position called a navigator. And with a bunch of federal money, they're going to come in and give people money to kind of go through people's neighborhoods and try and find those that don't have insurance and show them how to get to this website and how to navigate it. Sounds kind of simple, right?
This thing is starting to more and more sound like a Jobs Act for bureaucrats.
Well, a Jobs Act it is, because now the federal government has said, well, we don't know if the navigator is going to be sufficient, so we're going to give more of your tax dollars in the federal grants and create a second line of new activists to go out and give a bunch of money to what we call consumer assisters. And they're going to go try and find a bunch of people to bring them to the navigators, to then bring them to the exchange. And if that's not enough, in the past 3 weeks, they've also come up with contract administrators and ombudsmen. So now we're looking at 4 different groups of people being funded by the federal government to run around the state of New Hampshire to try and find people who want insurance, to bring them over to this portal to show them what their options are. Now, then the unfortunate part is we'd expect nothing less from our federal government is that those people can't sell you insurance. So the federal government has made a strict prohibition that they can talk to you about it, but they can't sell it to you.
Now, so the exchanges, and I think this is where the confusion comes in, the exchanges really have to do about where to find insurance, not necessarily get the insurance.
Exactly, because again, with this complication, people who already have insurance, and with the federal government and how they operate, we have to remember that Obamacare was passed in March of 2010. I think it was March 26th. So it's putting a lot of burdens on the insurance industry, because the feds are saying, hey, look, if you had an insurance plan before March of 2010, we're going to let you keep that and keep selling it. But if you're buying an insurance plan after 2010 up until today, we're going to make you make all these new different plans to offer. And then if you're going to be selling insurance within the exchange, we're going to make you make a bunch of different plans there as well. So essentially there's going to be 3 different marketplaces of which for people to buy insurance. So there's no question they're making it pretty complicated.
Yeah, and so it just sounds like a big mess. And then you look at it, like you're talking about the exchanges and this having people to go around and tell people how to get insurance. Let's not forget the 16,000 IRS agents that are going to be hired to make sure everybody has insurance. And in light of recent events, when you go to the IRS to say, well, I need a heart transplant, and they say, well, you didn't vote for the right people. I mean, this thing is a mess. It's just a disaster. And then, they're telling us we have to have these, speaking of New Hampshire, they're telling us we have to have these exchanges in effect by, the end of October, but yet the rules by the government haven't been established yet for how to run these exchanges and how the healthcare will be funded? Yeah,
absolutely. The question of the rules actually sits on my desk because I'm the chairman of Commerce. And we're trying to get it done by June 1st, because the plan is actually supposed to be operational October 1st, and they're supposed to be trying to force us to buy insurance by January 1st. And you're right, Ben, part of the challenge is we see new regulations. And when I say new regulations, we go back to Nancy Pelosi, who said, we have to pass the bill to understand what's in it. And we know how upset we all were about that.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of Nancy Pelosi. We know that. But at some level, what she said was pretty right, because it wasn't even just the passing of the bill that no one read. The federal government today is handing down rules, and suggestions every 3 weeks of hundreds of pages of new rules that continue to contradict themselves all the time, which is, again, making it so much more difficult to implement. This thing is, I really think the federal government has bit off more than they can chew, but obviously it's, Mr. Obama's, signature piece, so they're not taking the time to say, maybe we should stop and take a deep breath and figure out a great way if this is really going to work or not. But instead, it's all hands on deck, all trains say go.
Yeah, on the WNTK Newsline is State Senator Andy Sanborn. We're talking about healthcare exchanges, the lack of Affordable Health Care Act. I mean, you could just come up with a number of cliches on this one. But so one of the things that troubles me with this is, you talk about these rules, and it seems like they have these established rules, and they keep adding rules about who's eligible for insurance. They'll say, well, if you have a pre-existing condition, that's okay, we'll pay for it. Of course, the government says, the feds say, oh, we'll pay for it. I have questions about that, too. And they keep adding to who can be insured and how to develop that. Now, with that being said, it only makes sense to me if they force everybody into this insurance. On top of that, you're going to have businesses dropping out because the fines are too low. They'll say, well, why should I pay $16,000 for an employee when for $2,500 I can opt out? Aren't companies going to be discouraged from even being in the health insurance business?
Yeah, I mean, Ben, all kidding aside, I mean, we are going to see a radical change of how insurance is offered and implemented in the state. Not just the state, the country. I mean, we have to remember that right now the federal government is raising about $2.4 trillion a year and spending about $3.6 trillion a year. And we know our deficit's about $17 trillion today. Now, to implement Obamacare is going to cost about another $1 trillion. $1 trillion. That's a lot of money. And the only way they do that is to raise taxes. Now, part of what's making it difficult for employers, as you said, is trying to figure out what is the best way, because now we have a mandate. The law says you have to offer insurance, but if you don't offer insurance, they're going to make you pay a penalty and let those people go into the exchange. And part of that inducement, let's remember, Ben, part of that inducement for them to go into the exchange is the federal government's going to be offering you a subsidy. Now, the subsidy is up to $4,500 a person, but only if you buy insurance within the exchange. So we're seeing a couple things happen from that. It clearly is indicating that the federal government, under Obamacare, is trying to create a single-payer socialized healthcare system. And number two, when you start doing the math, that in order to entice people like, a piece of candy to get into the exchange and buy insurance in the exchange at $4,500 a piece, again, at hundreds of millions of dollars just for the state of New Hampshire, then that's only going to come from raising people's taxes to give those incentives to somebody else.
One of the other things, and Andy, I'm really getting tight on time here. One of the other things that troubles me, we're in a time of unemployment numbers for young people, which the numbers are staggering. There's some estimates, maybe 25% of all young people under 26 are now unemployed or underemployed. You got people with college degrees, and it's not just women's health studies graduates. You're talking about people with mathematics degrees now that are having trouble finding meaningful work. These young people are coming out of school, and now they're going to be told, oh, by the way, if you're over 26, you're going to have to buy insurance. If you're 27 and you're bulletproof, you kind of, youth is part of youth is being bulletproof and kind of taking that risk for a while. Now they're going to force all these young people into this system, which is going to be more costs for them. How do they justify this?
it's not even just forcing them in, Ben. The people who are going to be hit the hardest in Obamacare are the young people, and we're seeing already increases of their insurance premium costs between 30 and 80%, Ben. 80% increases of insurance for young kids who, you're right, don't have jobs, aren't making a lot of money today. Again, on a financial basis, this thing's in a lot of trouble, Ben.
Andy, unfortunately, I have to leave it there. I'm going to reach out to you again and get you back on to carry this conversation on maybe next week.
I look forward to it.
Thanks a lot. Hey, if I can put one more thing out there, your name's being bantered about as a potential run against Jeanne Shaheen, so I'd like that scoop when you're ready to go.
Right now, I'm just trying to work on the implementation of Obamacare and protect the people and small businesses of this state, and that's a big enough job all by itself.
Good answer, Senator. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks. That's Senator Andy Sanborn checking in on health care. It's 7:26 on WNTK.